Jaxon Huxley built his ranch on discipline, not on wealth, not on luck, not on loud talk or reputation. He built it on rules, routine, and silence. Every morning at the Huxley Ranch began the same way. Horses fed, cattle checked, tools lined perfectly in place, gates inspected, and every rider accounted for before the day's work began. Jaxon wasn't the friendliest man in the county, but people trusted him. His ranch hands respected him. His land ran smoother than most sheriff's offices. If something moved on Jaxon's land, he knew about it, which is why, on that particular evening, something felt wrong. He walked into the barn with a bucket of grain, expecting to see his pregnant mare lying peacefully in her stall. Instead, he heard breathing, not the heavy, rhythmic kind of a resting animal, but human breathing, quick, panicked, uneven. Jaxon stopped mid-step, eyes narrowing. He set the bucket down quietly and listened again. There it was, faint, hiding, someone trying not to be heard. Jaxon didn't reach for his gun. He didn't shout. He didn't run. He simply said in a low, controlled voice, "Whoever's in here, you need to come out." Silence. Jaxon took one slow step forward. "I'm not going to warn you again." Something shifted behind the tack boxes, soft rustling, a sharp inhale of fear. And then, like a frightened animal testing its courage, a young woman rose into view. She stood slowly, hands lifted, eyes wide. Her clothes were torn in places, and her breathing was trembling. Not from cold, but from terror. Don't hurt me," she whispered. Her voice was small and shaky, but something about it held weight, like she'd been carrying fear for too long. Jaxon lowered his hands subtly to show he held no weapon. "Nobody's hurting you," he said calmly. "This is my barn. You're on my land." I didn't mean to trespass," she stammered. "I just needed somewhere to hide." Jaxon studied her, not with suspicion, but with the cautious awareness of a man who had seen lies, truth, and trouble walk through his ranch before. His tone stayed firm. "Hide from what?" Her throat bobbed as she swallowed hard, and then she said 5 words that changed everything. "They're coming for me." Jackson's jaw tightened, though his face didn't show fear, only focus. "Who's they?" he asked, stepping closer. The girl took a step back, bumping into a hay bale. "I don't know their names, just that they're looking for me. I swear." "I didn't want to bring trouble here." Jaxon raised a hand gently, not touching her, just steadying the moment. "What's your name?" She hesitated. "Ella," she whispered. "Ella Mercer." Jaxon nodded once. "All right, Ella Mercer. You're going to start by telling me what happened." She looked torn, like part of her wanted to run, and another part wanted to collapse where she stood. "I can't," she breathed. "If I say too much, I'll put you in danger, too." Jackson's voice dropped even lower. "You already brought danger to my land by coming here. The least you can do is let me know what kind." Ella flinched, breathing faster. "I swear, I didn't have time to think. I just ran. I didn't even know where I was going. I saw the fence line and the barn. I thought maybe I could hide until morning." Jaxon exhaled through his nose. "Come on," he said quietly. "You can't stay out here." He motioned toward the house. Ella froze. "I'm not going in a house with a stranger." Jaxon understood that, more than she knew. "You're in my barn. That already makes me responsible for you. You can stand in the doorway if you want, but you're coming out of the dark." Ella hesitated, then nodded slowly. She followed him out of the barn with careful steps, like she expected a gunshot behind her at any moment. The ranch house was simple but sturdy. Wooden table, clean floors, shelves lined with labeled jars and tools, everything in its place. Ella stood in the doorway like she might bolt any second. "You can sit," Jaxon said, motioning to the chair. "I don't bite." She didn't smile, but she sat, stiffly, nervously, like her legs didn't quite trust being still. Jaxon poured her a cup of water and set it gently on the table. Her hands shook as she reached for it. "How long were you in the barn?" he asked. "Since before sunset," she whispered. "You eaten anything?" She shook her head. Jaxon set bread and leftover stew in front of her. Ella stared at it with disbelief. Then hunger took over, and she ate with quiet desperation. Jaxon waited until she slowed down before he spoke again. "You said someone's coming for you." Ella nodded, eyes glued to her hands. "Who?" Jaxon pressed. She inhaled sharply. "I saw something. Something I wasn't supposed to see." He didn't interrupt. "Men," she continued. "Dangerous ones. They work for a man people don't talk about openly." I didn't know what I was walking into until it was too late. Jaxon watched the way her fingers twisted together when she spoke, anxiety woven into every movement. "What did you see?" he asked. Ella looked him in the eyes for the first time. "Murder." The word hung heavy in the quiet room. Jaxon didn't flinch. "Go on." Ella wiped her eyes quickly, embarrassed by the tears. "I wasn't supposed to be near their meeting place. I was looking for my brother. He went missing 2 weeks ago. I thought maybe someone in that old storage house might have seen him." Jaxon listened intently. "But when I peeked through the boards, I saw the leader kill a man, just shot him like he was nothing. Then he laughed." She closed her eyes, as if trying to erase the memory. "When I gasped, he heard me. And he sent his men after me." Jaxon leaned forward. "You've been running since then?" She nodded weakly. 2 days. He took a deep breath. "You should have gone to the sheriff." Ella let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "I did. He works for them. He told me to leave before he lost patience." Jackson's expression changed, subtle, sharp, the kind of anger that didn't shout but promised action. "So you came all the way here?" Ella nodded. "I just needed a place where they couldn't find me. But I got lost and ended up here." Her voice cracked. "I didn't want to drag trouble to your ranch. I'm sorry." Jaxon stood slowly, walked around the table, and crouched beside her chair. "You didn't bring danger," he said quietly. "Danger came after you." Her eyes softened, but fear still trembled across her face. "If they find me here," she whispered, "they'll kill you too." Jackson's voice dropped, unwavering and strong. "They won't touch you, not while you're on my land." Ella stared at him, breath trembling. "But Jaxon, you don't even know who I really am." He met her gaze with absolute clarity. "I know enough." Ella's voice shrank to a whisper. "And what's that?" "That you're scared out of your mind and still trying to protect other people. That ain't the mark of trouble. That's the mark of someone worth defending." Ella's lip quivered. For the first time since stepping onto his land, she believed she wasn't alone. Jaxon rose, nodded toward the hallway. "There's a guest room. You'll sleep there tonight. You'll lock the door if it helps you feel safe. But you're staying. Understand?" Ella looked down, tears hitting her lap. "Thank you," she whispered. Jaxon gave a single nod. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we figure out what to do next." Ella stood, paused, and said something she hadn't said since her world fell apart. Good night." Jaxon watched her disappear into the hallway, and when the door closed softly behind her, he whispered to himself, "She's not running anymore. Not while I'm here." Something in his chest tightened, something he hadn't felt in years. Responsibility, protectiveness, purpose. He extinguished the lantern and stood alone in the quiet of his ranch house. But for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel alone at all. Ella barely slept in the guest room, not because it wasn't comfortable, but because stillness terrified her. Stillness meant thinking. Thinking meant remembering. And remembering meant reliving the moment everything went wrong. She sat upright in the narrow bed, knees drawn to her chest, listening to the faint sounds of the ranch at night. A horse shifting in the barn, the soft ticking of Jackson's wall clock, and the distant low grumble of cattle settling in. Every sound made her tense. Every shadow felt like footsteps. Around dawn, she slipped quietly out of the room and into the small kitchen where Jaxon was already making coffee, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly messy, like he'd been awake longer than she had. Ella startled when she saw him. Sorry, she said quickly. "I didn't mean to intrude." "You ain't intrudin'," Jaxon replied, pouring an extra cup without asking. "You're a guest." She eyed the mug cautiously. "Why are you up so early?" He took a slow sip. "Habit." Ella swallowed hard. "Did you sleep at all?" Jaxon shrugged. "Didn't need to." Ella stared into her cup. She knew what that meant. He stayed awake because of her, because of the men he expected to come, because bringing danger here had put him on edge. Her voice was soft. "You shouldn't risk yourself." Jaxon didn't look at her. "Not a risk when it's right." Ella's breath broke a little at that. After breakfast, Jaxon motioned for her to follow him to the barn. "I need to know the whole story," he said, voice even. Ella froze halfway across the yard. "Please don't make me," she whispered. "Every time I talk about it, it feels like I'm watching it all over again." Jaxon stepped in front of her, blocking her escape. "You want me to protect you, right?" She nodded, trembling. "Then I need the truth. All of it." Ella's hands trembled slightly as she clutched her elbows, grounding herself. "Okay," she whispered. They sat on an overturned crate inside the barn, her facing the open doorway, him positioned to watch her and the entrance at the same time. Ella inhaled shakily. "My brother Thomas. He disappeared a month ago. He worked in town for a supply clerk. He wasn't the type to vanish. Someone said they saw him being dragged behind the old warehouse on the edge of Iron Bend." Jackson's jaw tightened. "He was taken?" Ella nodded. "I went to look for him. I thought maybe he'd been hurt. Or maybe he had gotten mixed in with the wrong men." Her voice grew small. "I didn't expect to see what I saw." Jaxon remained silent, attentive, patient, but deeply alert. Ella twisted her fingers together. "I looked through a broken board. Inside, the gang leader, the man they call Garrick, was interrogating a merchant. Something about a debt. Something about new land rights." She swallowed. "The merchant begged for his life and Garrick just shot him, like it meant nothing. Then he laughed. I gasped without meaning to." Her face tensed with shame and fear. "He turned and stared straight at me through the boards, like he already knew exactly who I was. I ran until my legs gave out." Jaxon clenched his jaw. "You saw Garrick kill a man?" Ella nodded. "And he saw me watching." That was all Jaxon needed to hear. "He's coming," Jaxon said calmly. Ella's eyes widened. You believe me? The question was small, hopeful, scared. He met her gaze without wavering. I wouldn't sit here listening if I didn't. Ella trembled, not just from fear, but from shock. She hadn't realized until this moment how desperately she needed someone to believe her. They walked back to the house, only to find someone leaning against the porch post. Tall, broad shoulders, serious face. Mitch Huxley, Jackson's younger cousin and right-hand ranch hand. He eyed Ella like she was a puzzle missing important pieces. She the reason you didn't sleep? Mitch asked dryly. Jaxon ignored his tone. Ella, this is Mitch. He helps me run the ranch. Mitch crossed his arms. Huh, she looks like trouble. Ella stiffened, but Jaxon stepped between them. Mitch, he warned. I'm just saying, Mitch muttered. Last time someone showed up here needing help, we lost half a herd. Ella dropped her gaze. I can leave, she said quickly. No, Jaxon said sharply. Mitch's brows shot up. You taking her side already? I'm taking the truth, Jaxon replied. She saw Garrick kill a man. Mitch went still. Garrick? As in Garrick Hayes? Yeah. Mitch let out a long exhale. Well, damn, that's not trouble. That's a death sentence. Ella flinched. Jaxon shot Mitch a warning look. Mitch held up his hands. All right, I'll keep quiet. But if Garrick's coming, we gotta prepare. Jaxon nodded. We will, but Ella's staying under our protection until we figure this out. Ella blinked. You don't even know me, she whispered. Jaxon turned toward her. I know enough. To keep Ella moving and not sinking into panic, Jaxon assigned her small tasks, things that wouldn't overwhelm her but would help her feel grounded. She helped feed the chickens. She washed dishes. She learned to fold saddle blankets. She did everything quietly, softly, as though she feared leaving a footprint that someone could trace. Mitch watched her from the barn doorway, expression unreadable. You always this quiet? He asked. Ella stiffened. I never had much reason to talk. He studied her, then grunted. You don't complain. You work, better than most who ask for room and board. Ella blinked at the unexpected compliment. Thank you. Mitch scratched his cheek. Don't thank me. Thank him. He jerked his chin toward Jaxon. He don't help just anyone. Ella looked toward Jaxon, who was fixing a fence rail. I know, she whispered softly. That's why I feel guilty. Mitch sighed. He ain't doing it out of pity if that's what you're thinking. Ella frowned. Then why? Mitch smirked slightly. Girl, you really don't know Jaxon. Once he decides someone ain't wrong, he sticks to it. If he says you deserve protection, he'll die before letting anyone touch you. Ella's heart throbbed painfully. She wasn't used to anyone standing up for her. Not her brother, not anyone from her old town. Nobody. And now, this stranger was willing to risk everything. For her. That night, guilt strangled her. She waited until Jaxon and Mitch were asleep, then quietly packed her small bag and tiptoed to the door. But as she opened it, a voice behind her said, You really think you can outrun them alone? Ella froze. Jaxon stood in the dark hallway, arms folded. How did you know I was leaving? She whispered. He stepped closer. You're scared, he said softly. And scared people run when they feel like they're burdening others. Ella's lip trembled. I am a burden. No, he said firmly. You're a person who needs help. That don't make you a burden. She looked away. I'll just get you hurt. Jaxon stepped closer still. Ella. He lifted her chin gently. You deserve a chance to live. Her eyes glistened. I don't want to cause your death. You won't. he said simply. How do you know? Because I've seen men like Garrick my whole life, Jaxon replied. And I ain't losing to one now. Ella inhaled shakily. You don't even know me. Jaxon brushed a tear from her cheek. But I know what it looks like when someone deserves to be saved. Her breath hitched. She let the bag fall from her hand and collapsed into his arms, not from weakness, but because she finally felt a sliver of safety. Jaxon held her gently but securely, like someone who had already decided she mattered. And in that moment, Ella realized something terrifying. She trusted him. While Ella cried softly into Jackson's chest, Mitch burst into the hallway. Jaxon, he whispered urgently. You need to see this. Jaxon guided Ella behind him and followed Mitch outside. Mitch pointed toward the far ridge. Two distant riders, not close yet, but unmistakably tracking. Mitch's voice was low. That's Garrick's men. Jackson's face shifted, becoming sharp, controlled, lethal. He spoke without looking away from the ridge. Get the rifles! Mitch nodded and ran. Ella stepped beside Jaxon, breath trembling. They found me, she whispered. Jaxon didn't blink. They won't take you, he said. How can you be so sure? He turned to her. Because you're under my roof. He touched her cheek softly. And I protect what's mine. Ella's heart stopped, because for the first time, she felt like she truly belonged somewhere. And that terrified her more than Garrick ever could. When Jaxon Huxley said he would protect her, Ella had believed him with the fragile hope of someone who hadn't been protected in a long time. But standing behind him now, staring at the two distant horsemen approaching the ranch from the ridge, she understood something else. Jaxon didn't make promises. He made decisions. And he had already decided she wasn't leaving his ranch unless it was by her own choice. He stood straight, shoulders squared, eyes locked on the horizon like a man preparing for something he'd felt coming long before he saw it. Mitch jogged back to the house with 3 rifles in hand. They ain't in a rush, Mitch muttered. Means they ain't worried. Means they think this'll be easy. Jaxon took 1 rifle, checked it, and handed the second to Mitch. Ella swallowed painfully. What do we do? She whispered. Jaxon turned to her. You go inside the house, bolt the door, stay low. Don't open it unless it's my voice or Mitch's. Ella shook her head quickly, fear tightening her chest. I can't just hide while you fight for me. That's not fair. Fair ain't got nothing to do with it, Jaxon replied. You'll slow me down out here. You stay where I can protect you best. Ella's throat tightened. But if something happens to you... Nothing's happening to me, he said calmly. Not while you still need help. The conviction in his voice made her knees weaken. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even tense. He was determined. Pure, iron-willed determination. Ella couldn't argue with that. She nodded slowly, eyes burning with tears she didn't want him to see. Okay, she whispered. I'll go inside. But she turned back just before reaching the door. Jaxon, she said, voice trembling. He looked at her. If they take me, don't trade your life for mine. Jackson's jaw set hard. I won't. Something in his tone made her step closer. He touched her cheek briefly, a touch that said more than words could. You're not dying, he whispered, and you're not leaving. Ella's lips trembled. Promise? Jaxon looked directly into her eyes. I don't promise. I do. Mitch rolled his eyes from behind them. Can y'all flirt after we survive this? Ella startled, cheeks warm. Jaxon smirked once and jerked his head toward the door. Inside, he said softly. She obeyed, But she didn't go far. She crouched behind the window, peeking out with her heart racing. The men reached the gate. Two riders stopped 20 yards from the porch. The first man dismounted, tall, lean, with a slick confidence that showed he was used to being feared. His coat was dark, his boots polished, and his cold eyes carried no remorse. Garrick, the man who murdered a merchant in cold blood. The man who had hunted Ella for days. He walked toward the porch like he was strolling into a saloon he owned. Jaxon stepped out to meet him. Mitch positioned himself slightly behind and to the side, perfect firing angle. Garrick smiled. "Evening, boys. I'm looking for a girl. Pretty thing. Brown hair. Frighten her eyes. Might have run this way." Jaxon didn't blink. "You're not welcome here." Garrick chuckled. "Oh, I ain't here to make trouble." He lifted his hands mockingly. "Just need to take back what belongs to me." Jackson's voice hardened. "She don't belong to you." Garrick stepped closer, grin fading. "You know who I am?" "Don't matter." Garrick laughed softly. "That's where you're wrong. It matters a whole lot. See, I'm a businessman, and she saw me handle a business problem. Now she wants to run her mouth." "She didn't tell nobody," Jaxon cut in. Garrick shrugged. "Don't care. She saw, and she's gonna die for it." Ella covered her mouth behind the window as the words stabbed into her chest. Jackson's voice dropped dangerously low. "You touch her, you go through me." Garrick's smile returned, darker. "That's the plan." He snapped his fingers. 3 more men rode into view from the left side of the ranch. They had hidden out of sight until now. Ella gasped aloud. Jaxon and Mitch instantly shifted their stance. Garrick stepped back. "Bring me the girl," he said, "and I leave you two breathing." Jaxon lifted his rifle. "No!" The yard fell silent. Garrick's face twisted. "Well then," he snapped his hand downward, "take them!" The ranch exploded with motion. One of Garrick's men lunged toward Mitch. Mitch fired. The man fell. Another rode fast for the porch. Jaxon shot once, clean, sharp, dropping him from the saddle. A third crept along the side of the barn, firing at Jaxon from the shadows. Jaxon dove behind a water trough. Bullets splintered the wood around him. Inside the house, Ella flinched with every shot. Her chest ached. She wanted to run out there, wanted to help, wanted to scream, but she remembered Jaxon's order. "Don't slow him down." Her hands shook violently as she crouched under the window. Outside, Mitch ducked behind a fence post, firing as fast as he could reload. Jaxon rolled from cover, firing twice. First shot, miss. Second shot, hit. The gunman fell. Only Garrick remained. He walked toward Jaxon as if the chaos didn't faze him. Gun in hand, smile returning. "You made a mess of my men," Garrick said coldly. Jaxon rose to his feet, dust and gunpowder covering his shirt. "You made a mess of your own soul," Jaxon shot back. Garrick aimed his gun at Jackson's chest. "Move aside. I only need the girl." "I said no." Garrick fired. Jaxon jerked backward as the bullet grazed his side, tearing through cloth and skin. Ella screamed inside the house, slapping her hands over her mouth. Jaxon clutched his side but kept standing. Garrick smirked. "You look tired, rancher." Jaxon didn't reply. He lunged. The 2 men collided, crashing into the dirt. Garrick's gun skidded away. Fists swung hard. Garrick slammed Jackson's head against the ground. Jaxon elbowed him in the ribs. Garrick kneed him in the stomach. Jaxon grabbed his wrist, twisting sharply. They rolled dangerously close to a sharp pitchfork resting near the hay. Ella couldn't take it anymore. She ran out of the house. "Jaxon!" Her scream echoed through the ranch. Garrick spun toward her, rage lighting his eyes. You should have stayed hidden, girl. He lunged for her. But Jaxon, bleeding and staggering, reached him first, tackling him backward. Ella grabbed the nearest object, a wooden handle. She didn't know if it was a broom or a shovel. She just swung it with everything she had. It cracked across Garrick's back. He roared in pain. Jaxon seized the moment. He slammed Garrick to the ground, pinning him. Mitch rushed over with his rifle aimed. It was over. Garrick lay panting, beaten, defeated, fury dripping from every breath. "You think this is the end?" Garrick spat. "Someone else will come for her. Someone always will." Jaxon wiped blood from his lip. "No," he said. "This ends with you." Mitch struck Garrick across the jaw with the butt of the rifle, knocking him unconscious. Ella fell to her knees, shaking violently. Jaxon dropped beside her, pulling her into his arms. She clung to him like life itself. "You're hurt," she cried, pressing her hand to his bleeding side. Jaxon chuckled weakly. "I'll live, but I couldn't sit inside anymore." "Good," he whispered. "I needed you." Ella sobbed softly into his shoulder. "You saved my life," she whispered. Jaxon closed his eyes. "You saved mine." The sheriff from a neighboring town arrived hours later. Not Garrick's sheriff, a real one. Someone Mitch trusted. They arrested Garrick and the surviving men, loaded them into wagons, and promised Ella protection during the trial. Ella's name was cleared in the following days. Multiple witnesses came forward. Everything she said was proven true. One evening, after it was all over, Ella stood on the porch watching Jaxon fix the gate, his movements slower from the injury but still steady. She walked over quietly. "You risked everything for me," she said softly. He straightened, wiping his hands on his jeans. "You were worth it." Her heart fluttered painfully. "You don't even know who I am," she whispered. "I know exactly who you are." She held her breath. "You're Ella Mercer, the bravest girl I've ever met. The one who didn't give up even when the world wanted her dead." Ella's eyes filled with tears. "And you," she whispered, stepping closer. "You're the first man who ever fought for me." Jaxon cupped her face gently. "You're safe now." She leaned into his touch. "And can I stay here?" she whispered. Jaxon smiled softly. "This ranch ain't just mine anymore." He brushed his thumb across her cheek. "It's yours, if you want it." Ella let out a trembling breath. "I want it. I want you." He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. "You already got me," he whispered. And under the wide, open sky, no storms, no cold, no rain, just land, life, and the warmth of two souls finally finding home, Ella Mercer and Jaxon Huxley sealed the future neither thought they'd ever deserve.